So another thing I've been thinking about with this Tyler Robinson situation, and let's just break it down to yet another act of politically motivated violence, right? Maybe that's an easier way to talk about all of this. Instead of saying it's this specific person on the right who did this to this specific person and then all these other arguments get brought up, let's simplify it. So there have been acts of politically motivated violence that have happened on both sides of the aisle throughout the history of this country, and quite a bit more in the past, few decades. I think we can agree on that. There is another fundamental part of this that if we're actually going to have this conversation, people on the right do need to accept that the statistics are that quite a few more of these acts of political violence have been committed by people that are on the right. That is just a fact. That does not mean that it has not also happened on the left. But it does mean something very important. It doesn't mean that everything you say is now proven wrong by that statistic. What it means is that you just don't like the fact that the numbers lean heavily more towards your direction, because you feel like if you acknowledge all that, then you give up us having to acknowledge the things that the people on the left have done. And that makes sense, but that's also, I don't think, the case. I think you just have to take accountability. It doesn't mean you're taking personal responsibility for what these individual people's actions are, but that also goes for people on the left. It is not possible for anybody on any side to control what side another person chooses. And aside from politics, people are all kinds of unique and or fucked up, and the actions of one deranged or unhinged person, I do not believe represents the entirety of another group of literally millions of people, right? That's fair. And because it really just doesn't. There's so many fucking people. And that's one of the problems with everything being just left versus right, because there's so much fucking gray area in so many of these things that we fight about. But one of the things that I want to bring up, because the main argument that I've been seeing from the right is this whole thing with Charlie Kirk happened because the left has been too violent or putting out too much violent rhetoric. Now, yes, there has been definitely violent rhetoric and violent action from the left, for sure. And that's something that I believe a lot of people on the left have acknowledged and admitted and tried to address. What I feel like the left is not getting from the majority of people on the right is the acknowledgement of these facts, that you can't just point your fingers across the aisle and convince yourselves and try to just scream at us, thinking that if you just keep saying it loud enough and enough times that it will eventually become true, and just ignore the wake of politically motivated violence and violent rhetoric that you have left behind you. You have to acknowledge that. That has to be acknowledged. And I think another thing a lot of people on the right are not understanding about the left is that when we say something like the right is definitely more violent and puts out more violent rhetoric and seems to condone more violent things, we're not just talking about what us citizens say to each other or social media. It includes all of the dozens, if not hundreds of videos we've now been seeing in a short amount of time of immigrants being beaten up by immigration officials because Donald Trump, the person you support, who's out there saying the left's responsible for all the violence, is the one who made that happen. Okay, so we see that. We see violence coming from the right in that form as well. And we also see you guys cheering it on. We see our side wants to stop a genocide from happening. But we see so much of the right side wants to support the people doing the genocide. And we see a lot of those videos too. And then we see that we thought at one point we were all pretty much behind Ukraine. And then Donald Trump becomes president again. And then now it seems like the right has switched to supporting Russia, and the left still supports Ukraine, because we've never changed our minds about how wrong the violence that is being done to them by Russia is. But now you guys seem to support that too. So it's a lot more than just even the statistics of what an individual person on the right has done in the form of politically motivated violence. But even though those statistics are still way higher than the ones on the left, it feels frustrating for me to see people on the right talking about how violent the left is, okay? Because, again, I feel like a lot of you think we forget things, but I mean, we have the internet, we have memories. A lot of us talk about this stuff a lot, so it's still up here. We remember a lot of your past behavior. We remember that not only did so many of you make fun of George Floyd, you guys did the George Floyd challenge. And the thing is, I know not all of everybody on the right did this, but a lot of people on the right did, and the rest of you didn't condemn it, okay? So it was allowed to flourish. But like the George Floyd challenge, and there were people even literally more fringe, far right, I would say, but still didn't get challenged, like praising Derek Chauvin, the cop who murdered George Floyd. And then plus pretty much all of you sided with the cops anyways. So that really, really felt like you were not only condoning, but promoting violence. And by promoting the police in a fight against a marginalized community that has been, has had a lot of physical violence done to them by the group of people that you chose to support, that feels like you are condoning and supporting violence against us. All right? And then Kyle Rittenhouse, right? And I'm not going to say that anything about the people that Kyle Rittenhouse, shot. But it was an act of politically motivated gun violence. It was happening because he went to a place he should not have gone with a giant weapon he should not have brought there. And he did what he did. And you guys did not only condemn that act of violence, you started putting signs everywhere saying Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero. So this is why you are not getting the sympathy that for some reason you think you deserve from us about Charlie Kirk. What you are getting is actual realistic statements of condoning political violence, just like all of our Democratic leaders and me and many other leftists immediately came out saying, despite the really shitty people that we also condemned, I condemned all the people that were celebrating, okay? But you guys have never done that. Never done that. And then before even waiting again to know who even did this, you just turned on us. You just turned on us. You were so ready to attack us. So ready to be like, this is war. It's time for civil war. Your influencers are all on Twitter saying it's time for war, time to retaliate. I've seen the TikTok videos of some guy from Florida with 120,000 followers saying that it's time to genocide these crazy leftists. Okay? Like, your guys' response to not even knowing who the fuck did it yet was so violent towards us. Your Fox News stations, the president himself, you guys basically just fucking left no room whatsoever to actually see what really happened here. And that just feels to us like so many of you seem incapable of doing everything I just said in this video, acknowledging your massive, factually larger contribution to the politically motivated violence and violent rhetoric problem in this country. You have to acknowledge that. The onus for this one is on you, and if you truly actually mean it when you say you want to see violence stop, especially politically motivated violence and violent rhetoric, you have to contribute to that happening by acknowledging your part in it. Now, the last thing I want to address is what I've seen now a lot as one of the main arguments from the right for saying why they think the left has inspired violence against the right because of their rhetoric. And their main thing is, well, when you call us Nazis. Okay. We didn't just start calling you Nazis and didn't even think you guys were Nazis until you started exhibiting behaviors that closely matched the plan that Hitler had as far as like taking over a country and, switching from democracy to fascism. We literally have a playbook of how fascism unfolds in a country. And you guys don't seem to acknowledge that the people you've chosen to put in power are actually doing fascist and Nazi behaviors. And you guys are supporting them. The amount of you that publicly supported the First Amendment being destroyed when Donald Trump used the power of the government to censor someone and take away freedom of speech. The amount of you that supported our own president deploying our own military against our own citizens and literally kidnapping people off the streets and not giving them their constitutional due process. You guys supported that and still do. You guys supporting that is you falling into this level of fascism. I know you guys have said things like, oh, it's the stuff like, punch a Nazi. Well, that really doesn't happen that often. I think there's a mentality on the left that, because of so many other things I mentioned in this video that you guys have exhibited for so long that you just won't acknowledge, we see you as a grave danger and a threat and bullies. And a lot of us know that a way to kind of keep a bully off your back is to make fun of them or make them afraid of you so they don't screw with you. And that's the power of freedom of speech and why it exists. It's not a threat or hate speech to just say into the world, punch a Nazi. I mean, let me put it this way. For so long, you guys continuously called all Democrats pedophiles. Remember, this was back when you guys were the ones who wanted the Epstein files released? And then you started putting all over your vehicles, shoot your local pedophile. We knew what you meant. We knew what you meant. But you got to do that. Did you actually go out and shoot Democrats generally because you had those stickers? No. But it was a way for you to feel like you could be intimidating to people that you were intimidated of. So, I hope that makes it make sense because it's pretty much the same thing. In fact, the main difference is that ours was still less violent than yours. It's just something we say in response to all the things you guys say to try to intimidate us. That's how I feel about it. But then you have the other part of it that you also don't acknowledge, is that yes, I acknowledge not every person who supports Trump or is MAGA or is a Republican is a Nazi. That is absolute fact. But all of the people that do self-identify as Nazis, neo-Nazis, like Patriot Front, these other actual Nazi groups that go marching and wear swastikas, they all claim to be part of your party as well. That's the thing. Every Nazi is actually a Republican. Not every Republican is a Nazi, but it is the other way around. And we see it. And we'd probably say it less if you guys would be the ones to acknowledge that and kick the Nazis out of your fucking party. But you guys don't ever acknowledge any of the shitty things that your side does or about your ideologies or your own behavior. It's always just point the finger at the left, deflect, deflect, deflect. What about this? What about that? What about Joe Biden? What about Obama? What about Hillary's emails? What about Hunter's laptop? It's never any acknowledgement or accountability, and that's why we're all so fucking fed up with your bullshit. Seriously.